But one thing I want to say is the UK government is changing the rules time to time, and this is, I think, not fair for all the migrants people.
The most important thing is we are trying to encourage people to be active, encourage them to settle down, try to focus on what they are doing and follow the immigration procedures and rules and regulations, because that is very, very important. But because of some of the policies are very tough.
These policies are just about stopping people coming from outside the EU, or if they're here, making sure that it's easier to get rid of them. And it doesn't seem to me that anything's based on, well, the probability or your right to stay in a country is based on your contribution. It's just a set of rules that they're dreaming up to apply to certain classes of people under this system, this points-based system that they introduced a few years ago, but still is not completely up and running yet. It's still experimental. And they don't really pay any attention to countries that have had these systems in place for 40 years, like Canada, Australia, right? They're recreating the wheel in this ad hoc way because they have this political commitment, this is the coalition government, to reducing net migration from this level of a couple of 100,000 to tens of thousands. And you know, the only way they can do that is by stopping immigrants that that need visas, and that's that group that come from outside the EU. But that again will hurt Scotland.
The coalition government's promise to cut down migration from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands is frankly politicking. They're playing on the fears of British workers. They're using the economic crisis to really have a policy that plays well in the tabloids but doesn't really help our economy or improve the lives of migrant workers here, or indeed improve the lives of British workers.
I've been in Scotland since January of 2006. And I'm currently on a Tier 2 visa. And I'm really concerned with the further changes that they're mooting at this stage to Tier 2 visa. I know from my own personal experiences that settlement was planned quite early in my life as a goal, and I was going to work towards that and work towards integrating myself into British society. And I would imagine it's quite the same for people that have come on from April 2011 and who are thinking about coming on to Tier 2 visa now. And I think it's ignoring the fact that when you're in a place for as long as the Tier 2 visa allows, which is 5 years, that you are going to form certain settling actions, like forming networks, whether they're professional, whether they're on a friendship level, or whether they're romantic, and you're going to find yourself in a situation where the place that you are is now home. And that's certainly what's happened to me in the UK and in Scotland in particular.
In 2006 February I came to this country. We came all together, I mean me and my wife and 2 children, we came together here. And someone said that life begins at 40. I was 41 when I first arrived to this country and had to start everything from scratch. So eventually I got a job in Scotland and then came here and started working with the Highland Council as a youth development worker. And my wife, now she's working as a care worker in a nursing home. And I've got 2 children, both are very happy in school. Academically, both are doing very fine, very good, and I'm really proud of them.
Is that migrant workers provide high skills in areas of the public sector where local people quite often are either unwilling or unable to do the jobs. So what we find quite often is that in the private nursing sector there's a lot of migrant workers working as nurses, caring for our elderly community in their communities. It's absolutely critical. I think it's grossly unfair that you will be able to buy your way into residency in the UK if you just happen to have the money. Of course, Scotland and Britain needs people with entrepreneurial skill, people with high value skills. Of course we do, but we also need people to deliver frontline services, particularly as our community continues to age, particularly as our community continues to struggle with the economic impact of what we're seeing on a day-and-daily basis. So I think it's unfair, and I would rather see people with frontline skills given priority over people who can buy their way in.
Respect. So Scotland, in a sense, has some demographic characteristics that are more like Latvia and Estonia. They're looking at labour force decline, and any economist or businessman will tell you that have a growing supply of workers with the right skills is essential for longer term economic growth, and we're going to need economic growth because we're going to have to pay for this aging population, and unless we manage this process in a sensible way, we're going to have a reduction in our standard of living, and nobody wants that. But then again, the discussion is still not very sophisticated here, and the understanding of why Scotland is in this situation compared to other countries, compared to England, again, is not very well known. But
what the government is using this as exactly what is being suggested was to exclude more and more people the opportunity. It is not an automatic right, it's the opportunity to apply for residency. In short, the government is saying, we don't want you in this country. We want your skill, we want the taxation, we want your hard work, but when we finish with you, when we got the best of you, we want you out.
There's also the issue around, over 5 years, people build their lives. If they bring their are they expected to leave their families somewhere else? Or if they do bring their families and their children or young people, they build their families and relationships in the country that they're in for 5 years. So how are these migrants supposed to deal with their lives temporarily over 5 years? And you could argue that if we start having such sort of bounded rules in that way, that you could stack up problems in the future where, inevitably some people will not want to go back and may have to disappear, as happens in the States, and end up as undocumented workers. And is that what Britain wants in the longer term?
So I think a key issue with this consultation is that it's treating the UK as a single homogenous space and not thinking at all about the different needs of communities in different geographical areas, different kind of cultural parts of the UK. So Scotland, for example, has a lot of more rural or peripheral regions and areas that desperately need people to come and not just work there but also live there. So having migrants coming into these areas, and particularly when they can bring their family members and dependents with them, can be a way to keep these communities alive, to keep local services funded and active, to bring in new people with new ideas and new kind of enthusiasm and energy for community activities. And all of these things work much better when migrants come into our communities with a sense of being welcomed, being able to put down roots and to belong, not seeing themselves as people who are just allowed to come very temporarily as part of the labour force and then are expected to leave again.
The government is heading for a clash with Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, the right to a private and family life. It is very difficult for a person to be separated from their family for 5 years. We have nurses who came to this country and have not seen their children for 2 or 3 years, and they go through tremendous amount of hardship. And part of that process of trying to cope with it is that they think one day they can bring their children with them. One day when they apply for the indefinite leave to remain and they get that, and if they can get that, they can offer a better life for their children.
Because I think that each person should have the freedom of choice. As long as she and he follows the rules of that country, applies for visas, then he or she shouldn't be limited in their personal choice where to live, where to study and where to work.
I feel that I belong to Glasgow. I'm Glaswegian. I feel in global society you need a variety of people who inform you different values to Scottish people. So that I don't think that the new policy would be conducive to the development of Scotland.
I'm speaking out against these changes in the visa system because I think migrant workers play a really important role in our economy and that we need to protect them like we protect all workers.
It's difficult to extend visa because in point-based system they have changed the rules. So I'm not sure whether I can extend or not. And this rule really created a problem in the migrants people. For example, I have a son and he's studying here. He's in grade 6. So if I need to leave UK, then it really affects me as well as my family.
Unison are speaking out against these proposals quite simply because we want to see people defined by their skills, their ability, their contribution to their community, not by the colour of the skin or where they were born.
I mean, I think overall, I think it's highly suspect to develop, you know, an immigration policy, a policy that assumes that, you know, we will take people, you know, sort of to the point when we deem them to be useful to our society, and then when we think they've outlived their usefulness, we will send them back. I think that does not take into account that we're dealing with human beings, with human lives, who build connections with the place that they contribute to, and that, you know, that somehow as a society we may have some sort of obligation, a kind of mutual obligation towards them, to ensure that, you know, that we recognize that when people move to a country, they may also make their lives in that country.
I have a savings account for visa fees because they've continued to rise in my 8 years in the UK, and I know that my next one will probably cost me around £1,000. Many people couldn't afford to do this, and I know that it's a stretch even for me. I paid 3 times as much as a UK student to study here to get a master's degree. My ID card that I have that has all my biometric data in a chip on the back of it says very strongly that even though I pay UK taxes, I have no recourse to public funds. I like to think that I've come to the UK and I've contributed very, very positively to society, to the economy, and even to the delivery of government policy. Yet the view of migrants here is a very negative one, of people who come to be leeches on services, of people who come to stay illegally and to work in unskilled jobs. And in my experience, as an immigrant, that is completely untrue. It's not reflective of most of us. And I want to stay here. This is my home.